The Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Eric H., Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Matt aka Stormageddon, Ryan K., Stephen P., Gilmer, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading,
imprisoned for 10,000 years, banished from my own homeland, and now you dare enter my realm. You are not prepared.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, it is part 2 of the WoW, the World of Warcraft 20th anniversary celebration. You heard that right. It's been 20 years of the most highly used, probably, MMORPG, highly played, not used. I'm already screwing things up off the top of the episode. That's a howdy do. Welcome to the show. But we are here to talk about the first expansion for World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade. And joining me, returning guest from just a couple weeks ago, actually, maybe a little over a month ago, maybe, Mick Arcade. Mick, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. No, I'm great. Hello. Illidan Stormrage popped in for a second because he's so excited to talk about his expansion. No, I'm great, man. Thanks again for having me.
So excited to have you back on, man, and thank you for being on the Burning Crusade episode. I know that your heart was set on Wrath of Lich King, but my guests kind of filled up for that quick. And actually, you were kind enough, you were originally a guest on that, and then you were kind enough to switch over to this because I was short on a guest for this one. So thank you for being a team player and coming over to this one.
Well, so Wrath is my favorite, but honestly, Burning Crusade, really the first three WoW Classic, Burning Crusade, and Wrath hold a very close place in my heart. Wrath being my favorite because my favorite, it surrounds my favorite character in Arthas. But I have
Sauron?
Oh yeah, pretty much. I just have so many great memories associated with Burning Crusade, and I really think Burning Crusade is where I truly became a WoW player. So that's why I was like, yeah, BC fits too. So yeah, happy to talk about it.
Well, I thank you for jumping on this one. Always a pleasure having you back on the show. And as I've been doing for the series, and I am doing for the series, the first question I like to ask everyone is, how did you first get into World of Warcraft in general? It could be Burning Crusade if that was your entry point, but just WoW in general.
So I go way back with Warcraft in general. My older brother was a pretty big PC gamer in the 90s, so he had pretty much all the Blizzard PC games, because I mean, it was like if you played PC games in the 90s, you played Blizzard stuff, StarCraft, Warcraft, Diablo, all that. So it really goes back to Orcs versus Humans. Played a little bit of that, played a lot of the second one, Tides of Darkness, Warcraft 2. And then in high school, I think when I was a freshman or a sophomore, one of the two, Warcraft 3 came out, and I was obsessed with it. I played it like crazy. And when the Frozen Throne expansion came out, I actually did a lot of yard work for my girlfriend at the time for her mom, so I could afford to go buy Frozen Throne, so I could
Wow.
pre-order
Okay.
and go buy it. So then I got that, played it religiously, and then of course, maybe a couple months or so after Frozen Throne dropped, they started teasing World of Warcraft coming. And at the time, I wasn't super familiar with, EverQuest, which was kind of like the dominant MMO of the time. So I didn't really understand what WoW was going to be. It's like, wait, you play as like one character and you pay monthly? Like, what? That's insane. Why would I
Yep.
pay for it? I couldn't fathom an MMO. Like, it just didn't process in my brain at the time. So yeah, but to answer your question, I go back to the beginning, when Blizzard was making a Warhammer game, until Games Workshop was like, actually, no, you're not going to make one. We're pulling the license. And then they made it, Warcraft, Orcs versus Humans. So yeah, I go all the way back to the beginning with it. Love this entire franchise. I mean, I have Arthas and Frostmourne tattooed on the inside of my arm. Like, yeah, love it.
So just to make sure, so you've played WoW from the beginning, like WoW specifically. I
Oh,
know
yeah.
how you got into Warcraft, but WoW specifically, you played from like vanilla.
I started in vanilla. My brother was in the army at the time.
Okay.
He came home from leave, and he was playing. He was overseas. He was in Germany. He was stationed in Germany at the time, so he was playing, and he came back, and because he was stationed in Germany, he lives on the base, which means he doesn't really spend money on anything. He doesn't pay for food. He doesn't pay for lodging, nothing. So he just had all this money, and he took a look at the computer I had at the time, and he said, it's not good enough. We got to get this upgraded. So he went and bought like a better graphics card and like RAM and all that stuff, got me set up on WoW, and paid for my subscription for like 2 years or something so I could play, because, I was in high school at the time. So
yeah,
didn't have any money and all that. But again, he was kind enough to get me set up, to get me started in vanilla WoW. And I'll never forget, I remember the first character I made, a troll warrior, and I was like, oh, this is a mistake. I should have made a troll warrior. It was not a great way to start.
Why not a troll warrior?
I don't know. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Or, okay, let me take a few steps back. I know what I wanted to play as, but they were not in the game yet. I wanted to make a Death Knight, but Death Knights were not in the game, because like that was one of the hero classes in Warcraft 3. They were one of the special units in Warcraft 2 for the Horde, and they were very cool. And I'm D&D guy, so Death Knights are just cool, and you couldn't be one. So I was like, well, I'll make a warrior, because that's kind of like a close approximation. And I probably should have made a Forsaken, but I didn't like that they had like the exposed bone on their armor. I thought it looked kind of goofy. So I was like, man, that doesn't look cool enough. So I think I settled on Troll, because they had the like quick regeneration, like they could heal themselves faster. So I thought, oh, well, that'll be like super useful. It's not useful at all in the game. It's almost pointless. But me having like no knowledge of anything, I was like, well, I'll do this. And so that was the first character I made, and I pretty much made like every class and race combination that you can, just trying to find one that I liked, which and that's where I come back to Burning Crusade to say, like, it kind of made me a real WoW player, is I finally figured out the combination that worked for me. And I was like, okay, I like this works, this clicks. So.
And for myself, just as a quick recap, because I did cover it last episode, and just because I never know if this is going to be someone's first episode in the series for some reason. I don't know. You never know. But very quick recap. I just I played it. I remember playing a lot of the free MMOs like Night Online and RuneScape Online, or not RuneScape Online, just RuneScape, or Cal Online was another one. And just the idea of paying for an MMO was just foreign to me. So I eventually caved because my buddy Tristan got me in. Tristan, who was the guest from the last episode, and was hooked ever since. And yeah, it was I loved it. Now I only really played during Wrath. I played a little bit during Kata, but then I didn't really play much after that. I came back on for Mists of Pandaria, and I think I bought Warlords of Draenor, or one of the two. I might have bought Warlords, maybe not.
I still think Warlords probably has the coolest trailer to date for any WoW expansion. It might have the coolest one.
I'm gonna have to see like all my so. I moved into a new house. I've said it before on the show. Not everything is unpacked. So a lot of my PC games, my PC boxes are not in the office where I'm recording. They're still up in the attic. So I don't have them in front of me to know which ones I've bought and which ones I have not. So who knows? But anyway, so that's just a really brief recap of my experience of getting into World of Warcraft. Yeah, and Burning Crusade, for me, it was like an expansion that I unfortunately just really missed. Like, I've actually spent a lot more time in Nilla WoW and in Wrath than I have in BC, and I say that because in Nilla, obviously you have to play through the original WoW to get to the next expansion, to get all the way up to Wrath. So I had to play through all of Nilla, all of BC in terms of just leveling, not necessarily in terms of raids or end game content, but in terms of leveling, I played through it a whole bunch of times. And every time you create a new character, you have to start in Nilla WoW. So I would always roll a lot of characters, but I necessarily wouldn't ever get them too high of a level. So I have a lot of it. I've spent a lot of time in the original WoW in Nilla. I only really had one character that made it all the way through Burning Crusade up to like Wrath, up to level 80, right? So I really didn't have that much time, and I didn't really spend that much time in there. It was just the time to level up and then move over to Northrend. And so and because of that, I didn't really get to experience Burning Crusade at all. And so that's why this episode, I being honest and a little bit behind the scenes for the listeners, I'm actually a little like I'm nervous about it because like I don't have a lot of experience with this, which is why I have my wonderful guests on to talk about their experiences with stuff like this because like I played a lot in Northrend. I spent a lot of time in Northrend. BC I have a lot less like frame of reference for. Like we talked about in the last episode some of our favorite zones. I can tell you mine in Outland, but like I don't know it all that well, even with that said. So it's going to be an interesting experience. Just for some quick stuff off the top, not really a lot of it, but this this expansion came out in North America on January 16th, 2007 in Australia, and that's in Europe and North America, excuse me. And then Australia the very next day on January 17th. And actually in Asia, it also came out on the 16th. So it pretty much went worldwide on just about the same time, like almost all across the board. But I think to start off with this, we should start talking about the differences between Nilla and this, and none more bigger than like even take out Outlands. We're going to get to Outlands. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But there is two brand new races that they added to World of Warcraft. In the original one, you had, what was it, 5 races, I want to say, or was it 4?
You had trolls, orcs, Forsaken. Why do I feel like Tauren? And then it was 4 on each side, and then Alliance was humans, dwarves, gnomes, and night elves.
Yeah, so it was 4 for each, and then they added a 5th one in this, and the Alliance got Draenei, and the Horde got Blood Elves. But before we talk a little bit more about these two races, I got to ask you, Mick, Alliance or Horde?
I'm a horde for the horde. Like
Thank you.
I'm a horde guy. Like I have over the years, I've played both. I've played Alliance. My first character, like I said, was a troll warrior. So I started on the horde. I've always been more of a Horde guy than the Alliance anyway. Even in the games, I'm just more of a Horde guy. Um, I mean, really, I'm a Scourge guy, but they're not, they're not an option.
Mhm.
But yeah, I it's for the Horde for sure.
It's funny. I forgot to ask my previous guests, like at the top of the episode, my guests from last week, the same question, but we did cover it. All of us were Horde players. My buddy Jamie specifically citing, like, you're playing a fantasy game. Why would you play the one with humans?
Yeah,
Like,
that's completely fair.
I think I just did it because that's what all my friends did. Though I was telling you off mic, I am planning on restarting up World of Warcraft, playing WoW Classic again, and I might play a Night Elf. I might switch to Alliance just because I don't really have a lot of experience in that. And I'm debating if because do I switch over to Alliance and play my favorite class, which is Hunter, or because that's the only class, like I was saying before, I only ever had one character really make it up to the max level, and that was my Hunter. So do I just do that shit all over again? I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, so let's talk about these two races here. So you have Blood Elves and you have Draenei. They're really interesting how they kind of incorporate these two races into the fold. The Draenei are aliens that they basically they were part of they're part of a race, and they were basically exiled, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's sort of, yes. That's probably the easiest description of what they are and what happened.
Well,
It's
they
very complicated.
well, and then they crash land in Azeroth, and and then they get their starting area. And then the Blood Elves, they were originally night elves that became corrupted by the lust of magic.
So, sort of. Again, so the Blood Elves.
Then this behind the scenes documentary I'm watching is just lying to me, Mick. I watched the Burning Crusade behind the scenes, and that's what they told me.
So they were high elves. Originally the Blood Elves were high elves, and yes,
Okay.
they did get addicted to magic. And it gets mostly explored in it's heavily explored in the expansion for Warcraft 3, because you have like Kael'thas, who starts the Blood Elves. Basically the elves that used to be allied with the Alliance got real pissed because they were very magic dependent. When Arthas destroyed the Sunwell, they essentially lost their main source of magic, and they were like heroin addicts, and they started to go into like withdrawal because they're extremely magic dedicated beings, and they've lost their main source. But because they allied with Illidan, he gave them access to essentially like Burning Legion magic, or like demonic magic, which is why they have green eyes. Because that's why. And there's like all sorts. That's why there's like, or there used to be. I don't think there is anymore. But in like Silvermoon, there would be like floating green shit all over the place because that was a gift from Illidan, basically, to let them not turn into withdrawing heroin addicts, because they didn't have the magic. But so they were high elves originally. They were just. But then, the Sunwell got wrecked by Arthas, and, well, bad things happened.
Something cool about that they talked about in the behind the scenes documentary. I didn't get to finish the whole thing. It's an hour long. I watched about like 40 minutes worth of it. That I thought was really interesting about the Blood Elves in their capital city, Silvermoon. Half of the city is wrecked by there's the Dead Scar or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it the Dead Scar or just the?
Yeah, I think it's the Dead Scar. But basically that's the path that Arthas cut through Silvermoon to go destroy the Sunwell.
Okay. Well, the one half of the city, on the other side of the Dead Scar is dilapidated, and the other half looks beautiful and whatnot. And the reason for that is that a lot of their structures are held up by magic, are being they're architecturally supported by magic. And once Arthas destroyed that, and they had to find magic elsewhere, which I believe they used demonic magic, like you said.
Yeah, it's from Illidan.
Mm-hmm. That's what they were able to use to rebuild part of their city, but they can't afford, they don't have enough magic to be able to hold the whole city together. I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of build storytelling into your like visuals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's awesome. So one of the things, I guess this is the spot where I can talk about this. That's one of the things I think why I like Burning Crusade so much is because it picks up a lot of plot points that Frozen Throne left, that Vanilla WoW didn't focus on at all. A lot of things that you
Mm-hmm.
do, or a lot of the threats in Vanilla WoW, are sort of unique. Not
Mm-hmm.
unique, but like they're unique in that they kind of do their own thing, like the Defias Brotherhood. That's sort of its own thing. The Onyxia storyline, that's its own thing. And the Medivh stuff is in Burning Crusade. Anyway, sorry, I'm trying to not
It's
get
okay.
it
I
crossed.
will believe whatever you tell me because I don't know WoW lore in the slightest.
Oh yeah, so a lot of like I said, a lot of vanilla stuff was not picking up plot points from Frozen Throne.
Okay.
Like there are some things that you do, like you kind of confront Kel'Thuzad and you go to the Plague Lands and things like that. But like I said, the kind of main things that I think people remember, like Ragnaros and Onyxia and things like that, that wasn't anything that happens in Frozen Throne or really focused on. Where Burning Crusade largely picks up a lot of threads that were introduced there, like Kael'thas and the Blood Elves are a main component. The Draenei are also a main component. They were introduced in Frozen Throne as well, but they were introduced in a different way, where they were the broken Draenei. That's who you got introduced to, and you run into a few of them in BC as well. But as how they're portrayed to us in BC was not how we saw them in Frozen Throne. So that's where it got a little confusing, because you're like, wait, these guys were bad guys in Frozen Throne, or like allied with Illidan, and they look different. Why are they weird space goats now? But same thing with the Blood Elves, where that was something that was introduced in Frozen Throne. So BC picks up a lot of that. Like, you deal with Lady Vosh, you deal with Kael'thas, you deal with Illidan. You go to Outland, which is something that happened in, like in Frozen Throne. When it leaves off, Illidan is establishing himself as the Lord of Outland. Like, that's sort of what happens. Like, he's broken off from the Burning Legion. He's like, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be the Lord of this land. Let's fucking go. And then none of that is addressed in Vanilla WoW. Same thing
Okay.
with Arthas. Like, Arthas goes up to Northrend. He becomes one with the Lich King. So you're like, oh, hell yeah, we're going to fight this fool in Vanilla WoW. Nope. I think you hear his voice in Vanilla WoW, and that's it. And like, you hear that in
Nax, I'm guessing.
Yeah, in Naxxramas. Like, I think you hear Kel'Thuzad talking to him, and that's it. Now, granted, Arthas doesn't show up for another expansion, but the idea was like, oh, cool, we're actually picking up a plot thread that was laid, that if you played Warcraft 3 and Frozen Throne, you're picking that up. I mean, even from there, like in Warcraft 3, a lot of the stuff from the Burning Legion is introduced, and not really a lot. I mean, I don't want to say it's not in Vanilla WoW, because somebody will be like, hold on, asshole, like Ragefire Chasm, or this place begs a difference. It's like, yes, the Burning Legion is in Vanilla WoW, but not presented to us in the way that it was in Warcraft 3 and in Frozen Throne. It's more so in that capacity in Burning Crusade, because they are like the major threat, where in a lot of ways Vanilla WoW feels like it was kind of trying to figure out what it wanted to do. Burning Crusade, they were like, oh yeah, we had like 2 games where we kind of put a bunch of story that we can pick up now. So
well, and
that's what I like about it.
you can kind of see it too in like, so I only really did end game content in Wrath, like I said, but I'm looking at a list of all the different like raids and like big events in each one, at least according to Wikipedia. Listeners, like I said, this part's a little surface level, but like looking at what the raids and stuff were in Nilla, you had Assault on Blackwing Lair, which is Onyxia, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, and her brother, whose name I can't remember.
Nefarian.
Yeah, Nefarian. That's it. I was like, it's like
Rise
something stupid sounding.
the next raid is Rise of the Blood God, which is Atal Hakar. Well, that's what I guess the storyline they're going for. Maybe not the raid. That's Zul'Gurub, I believe.
Yep,
Is
the
that raid?
poison blood, which was a god that
Then you
wrecked
have
so
the
many
Gates of
characters.
Ankaraj, which is on AQ was that huge raid, that big event there, and then finally you have Shadow of Necropolis. Those four all feel like separate storylines. I don't know. You could correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch. Or Mitch, I'm sorry, Mick. You would know. I see Lich King, and so I went with Mitch. My bad. But
You're good.
um, correct me if I'm wrong, Mick, but those four raids are all separate story. Like it's not like they have any connective tissue for like other than some maybe loose ones. Am I correct with that?
No, you're pretty much right with that. It's stuff. That's one of the other kind of things about Vanilla WoW is that it's kind of arguable who the main threat is, because as you said, once they started, like, as you go down through the patches, it's like a completely new threat, and it's not like, oh shit, it's Onyxia. This is like the main threat throughout the whole thing, and like at the very end, the final patch, you defeat her and face her. Like, she's often, I think, either her or Ragnaros are considered the quote unquote final boss of that particular game.
Yeah.
But as you said, yeah, like they're not really connected. Like AQ isn't super connected with her, and like, Zul'Gurub isn't like it's all these different threats that serve different masters, or like coming from different places.
Oh, and then you look at Burning Crusade, and the three that they have listed here is the Black Temple, which is
That's the fight
you
with Illidan. Yeah.
that's a then you have the Gods of Zulaman. I think Zulaman was the actual raid. That happened back on Azeroth, though. That wasn't in Outland as far as I'm
Yeah.
aware. And then it goes back to Fury of the Sunwell, which I would assume is back out in Outlands, correct?
Which one again?
Fury of the Sunwell. It's
No,
you
that's also in Azeroth, because
is
that's in Quel'Thalas.
okay. So but since this it's regarding the Sunwell, and then also oh my gosh, Illidan in Black Temple, those two seem at least connected in some way, shape, or form, just based off the fact that it's both blood elves. Am I right with that?
Yeah. I mean, so even like the Sunwell, that connects, because with that one, it's dealing with the Burning Legion, because initially you're dealing with Illidan is the main threat. You defeat him, but Kael'thas Sunstrider, who was like one of Illidan's lieutenants, he kind of goes nuts and works for the Burning Legion. So then you're dealing with a Burning Legion threat in the in the Sunwell, in the battle for the Sunwell.
Okay.
Because they're trying to summon someone through the Sunwell, and like he uses the
Yeah.
Sunwell as like a teleporter for the Burning Legion, basically. So you have to deal with that.
So the point I was trying to get at then, because I did need some clarification before, because otherwise if I was wrong on this, then my point would be useless. But it very much feels like Nilla was just straight up world building. If you think about it, like how the first season of almost any drama is all world building, and then they throw like a plot twist in the last episode to get you excited for season 2. It kind of reminds, depending on when Naxxramas came out. I don't know if that was the last raid or not. I don't know if the list here is in order of release date. But like with Vanilla, you have Assault on Blackwing Lair, Zul'Gurub, Ankaraj, and then Naxxramas. So you have those 4 big events. They're all kind of disparate, but they're all setting stages for like different storylines that you might see later on. And you do see, at least with Nax shows up again in Wrath, so they do tie those back together. As for the rest, I have no fucking clue if they connect back to like anything with Onyxia or Ragnaros or any of
No,
that.
those kind of make their return in Cataclysm. Those are
See,
more,
I
because
remember that.
Deathwing
Yeah.
is the main focus,
Yep.
and Onyxia and Nefarian are his kids. So Yeah. So that's how they tie it back. Again, like it really feels like Blizzard figured out their groove. By the time they get to Wrath, like Burning Crusade, there's a lot of kind of them experimenting and them dipping their toes back into the stories from, Frozen Throne and Warcraft 3 and saying, oh, let's pick up some of those plot threads that were kind of left undone, or like things that we introduced and then you just haven't seen them because, by the time you get to Vanilla WoW, if you played Warcraft 3 and Frozen Throne, like, who Illidan is, and that he's in Outland, and he's setting shit up, but that's it. Like, you don't see him. There's, like maybe there's mention of him, but that's just nothing that happens. Another thing is you're like, well, where the hell are the elves? Like, where are the blood elves? Like, but then they get introduced. And so it's one of those things that I think Blizzard was just trying to figure out a lot of stuff with Burning Crusade and experimented. And everything I've ever heard them talk about was, we knew that we needed to do an expansion, but we didn't really know how to do an expansion because, they were not prepared for the level of success that WoW hit. They were just like, man, we thought, man, this would be cool if we got like 100,000 players, and they ended up with what, like 4 million or something crazy, or maybe more.
I mean, I know at its height, it was like there was 10 million people playing.
Yeah. Like, so with Vanilla WoW, they had no, like, and you could see it a little bit with late game content in Vanilla where they're just like, holy shit, we have so many players and we need to keep giving you content, but we were not prepared for this. So Burning Crusade's sort of an extension of that, I think, where they were like, we have ideas, but we don't really know how to execute them yet. But they tried a lot of stuff and they experimented, and I think it's a really fun and cool expansion that they found a groove towards the end of Burning Crusade that carried over into the following expansions where they're like, oh, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is how we need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they made, I don't want to say mistakes, but the difference with BC compared to Wrath, like they gave you a little bit more choice with your zone, where you could go to this one or you could go to the other, whereas with BC, it's like, nope, your ass is going to Hellfire Peninsula, and that's the choice. There is no choice.
I mean, kind of props to them though, because that really kind of like we touched on it in the last episode about how one thing that I don't like about, now granted I haven't played modern WoW in quite some time, so like I think I said my last expansion was Warlords of Draenor. I don't even know if I even played that. I remember buying Mists of Pandaria though. I know I played during Mists of Pandaria. But one thing that they did in it is that they kind of almost overly streamlined everything to the point where like you don't even need to like socialize with people. You can do quests with the quest finder without having to ask for help at all. You can like, if you're trying to look for a dungeon, they have the dungeon finder, and they had like a kind of a crappy version of it. I don't know if it started here in BC, but I remember in early Wrath it was like a separate like looking for group channel that you could just put your name on like a waiting list, and then if someone was interested in you, they would DM you, type of thing. And then eventually they got that thing where like you can literally just, they will automatically pair up groups. It's just all automatic. And the reason I say it's kind of a bummer is like that kind of stopped players from doing the multiplayer part of it. It was all just like, there was no socialization, there was no like forcing yourself to explore the world. And then here in Burning Crusade, everyone shows up in the same thing. Can you imagine, like, I don't know if you played it on day one, but like all the players showing up and they're all like, the amount of ganking that had to have occurred in the day one in Hellfire Peninsula has got to be wild.
3,000 years ago, I was there. The fucking literal war at the Dark Portal. Holy shit. It like straight, because there was those moments where, you got the alliances standing there, you get the horde is standing there, we're all waiting. and some motherfucker has to do something, and
Mhm.
then it all jumps off. And yeah, and it was because like that was basically it. It's like usually it was like a rogue, some fucking rogue was like, I'm gonna be funny and I'm gonna go like just backstab a mage because lol. And then shit was on. So much so that I was like, you know what? Just gonna go make a low level character and not deal with this bullshit because it
Wait till
was,
it
man.
dies down. Let people get
Yeah,
to the
pretty
other areas.
exactly. That's what I
They
did.
can fight it out. Let them get to the other areas, and then I'll come back to Hellfire and do this all over again.
Exactly. That's why I was like, I'm gonna go make a Draenei and play as a Draenei. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go make a Blood Elf and play as a Blood Elf. Which that was what a lot of people did too. Like you had people who were like geared up high level, because there were some people who were just level 60, but you're not geared, you're not doing
Mhm.
high level content or anything like that. So you're just like, oh hell yeah, let me go into Hellfire Peninsula. And that's like the thing too. Like the little junk green items that are dropping off of just like trash mobs is way better than any of your high level top tier gear, and you're just like, well fuck me, I guess. So that's the other thing too, is like you some people just wanted to get into the content. Some people were like, yeah, no, we're a top guild, we're ready to go and let's kick some ass. And but then some folks were just like, nah, I'm gonna go to Azure Mist Isles or Blood Mist Isles and have a good time, and or the Ghostlands or Eversong Woods, like, and that's what I did. I was like, I'm gonna go make a low level character and fuck all that shit. I'm not trying to get stabbed just from every 2 steps walking.
I was also never like I'm always the type of person where it's like if there's too many people doing the same thing, and this isn't even like a hipster thing where it's like, I'm just gonna not do what everyone else is doing. I would do it not because of that reason. I would do it because of like it's just crowded. There's too many
Yeah.
people here. I want some space, man. Can I just have a moment to chill, please? I want to take a look. I want to take a look at this.
And it's not just and it's not just getting like yanked or whatever. It's just trying to complete a quest, And it's again, as I said, they're really trying to figure a lot of things out. So they didn't. It was like collect 10 boar ribs from hellfire boars or whatever, and there's just like 4 billion people running around doing the
Yep.
exact same quest. So you're just like, well, shit, man, I can't do anything. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because the moment you try to attack a boar, someone probably gets to it before you.
yeah, and depending on what class you were playing, if you don't have ranged attacks, it's even worse, because if somebody's like a hunter or a caster, they can hit stuff way farther away than if you're,
Mhm.
having to run up and slash it.
Dude,
It's like
especially like hunters where there's no like cooldown time. Like you don't have to
oh
like
yeah,
charge up an attack. I mean, granted, you don't want to pull everything because then you're kind of fucked, but still, like it's crazy.
yeah. And for me, so I guess I should have covered this a little bit with my experience with Burning Crusade. But when it came out, I worked at GameStop, and
Mm.
I worked the midnight launch with GameStop, and then bought the collector's edition. My wife bought one as well. It was her. This was her introduction to WoW, was Burning Crusade, and we both
Okay.
went home at it's like 2:00 in the morning, because by the time everybody got through, rang everybody up, all that kind of stuff. And we bought like t-shirts and a little like binder. We bought the collector's edition, went home, downloaded the game, installed the game, all that good stuff. And then we went and we made Draenei, and we were running around, and because at the time my brother was playing as Alliance, so we made Alliance characters so we could play with him. And yeah, we just were running around as our Draenei. I was a paladin, she was a mage, and we stayed up till like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Just
That's awesome.
cracked out on WoW, brother. But then eventually we made blood elves, and I made a paladin and she made a hunter. And yeah,
Wait, so
loved it.
this is your wife that you played this with? Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Was
at the
this
time
like
she's my girlfriend, but
your ex-girlfriend, now wife? I understand.
yep.
I sometimes I've this is a non sequitur. Sometimes I've referenced my wife in front of her as my ex-girlfriend just to see her reaction.
I gotta try that.
I can't even take credit for that. Comedy Bang Bang does that joke where he's like, my ex-girlfriend Kulop. Scott Ackerman, the host, does that. He's like, my ex-girlfriend Kulop. And they're like, aren't you married to her? He's like, yeah, she's not my girlfriend anymore. I married her. She's my wife now. She's my ex. She's my ex-girlfriend, now wife. I don't know, it tickles me. Anyway, non sequitur over. So you guys did you play it back in 2007 when it came out, or was
Yep.
this like,
Yeah,
wow,
the
so you guys have been
night
together
that it
for a
came out.
while.
Yeah, night that it came out. Like I said, I worked the midnight opening to sell it to other people and bought it myself at the end, went home, installed it, and we played, and it was great. It was that, because it's that point in life where you don't really have any responsibilities. Like, I worked
Oh,
at GameStop,
I
but
miss
like,
that.
yeah, think about it a lot as someone now who has a lot of responsibility. Just like, oh, to be like 20 or 19 or 20, however old I was, and just my only thing that I had to do is play some World of Warcraft and work my 6-hour shift at GameStop. That was it.
Dude, I didn't even say this on any of the episodes. When I was at the height of my WoW playing, I was in college. I was working at a grocery store, and I would work. My shift was only like 2 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So it was like 6.5 hours, right? And I remember it was 6.5 hours. I would come home, and this was at the time when Mountain Dew was doing like the competitions for different flavors. So
Yep. I remember
I
that.
know Voltage was one that got chosen. But then there was I did one. I saw there was one. It was oh shit, what is it? There was a red kind, a blue kind, or like a white/blue kind, and then a green kind. And the white/blue kind was like whiteout, and that's the one that won. And that one was the most boring. Like, I don't know why that one won. I was so depressed that one won. There was the green one. I forget what it was called, but when I bought a 12 package of each of them, and I remember bringing it over to a friend's house, and the one friend was like, "It just tastes like someone stuck their thumb in a Mountain Dew. Like, that's the flavor of this green one." Like, it's just someone took a regular Mountain Dew and just stuck their finger in it.
How can we take regular Mountain Dew and make it worse?
That's pretty much what it was. But I would buy a shitload of Mountain Dew. I would have a 12 pack next to me, maybe like 3 of them, and I would just like drink them for like, I wouldn't go through a 12 pack a night, but it was bad. Like, I would drink at least like 3 to 4 cans a night. Maybe not that much, maybe 3, but that's still like so much sugar and caffeine. But I was also like 22. So who gives a shit? I was, or not even, I was like 20, and I would stay up till 4 a.m. playing World of Warcraft. Um, yes, till 4 a.m. playing World of Warcraft, and then I would wake up at 10 o'clock, get any homework done that I needed to because I was in college. And I think I even I grouped my classes so they would always be on just like 2 days. So I would work most of the time, but then just 2 days I would be at college from like 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. because I went to a community college. Um, and that was it. That's all I ever needed. And some days I didn't even have to stay till 10 p.m. So like, I would get all my schooling done in 2 out of the 5 days, do my homework before work, and then I would come home and play and like WoW from basically 9 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Living the dream, brother.
Oh my god, I miss it so much.
Yeah, like I think that's one of the things that I love the most about like BC, because like by the time Wrath rolls around, like at that point we've got our own apartment, and like, that's cool, but you're also working more. You're kind of broke as shit because the jobs that you have are not great, even though they're full-time and you like have your own place, but you don't have a lot of money. But that's when was Wrath. But Burning Crusade is just a kind of that pure moment in time where it was like, still lived with my parents. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, my ex-girlfriend, she lived with me as well, and that was all we had to do, because she was going to college at the time. She wasn't working at that time. So yeah, it's all we had to do was just basically play WoW, hang out, and I'd work a little, she'd go to a few classes, and that was it. And it was beautiful. And I miss those kids, those crazy kids, and their blood elves and their fucking 4 o'clock in the morning Jack in the Box salads and curly fries. Because that's what we would do. We would just play hours and hours of Warcraft. Be like, oh man, I'm really hungry. And we would just drop, because Jack in the Box was 24 hours. So it'd be like 3 o'clock in the morning. We would just we were on laptops too. Like that's how bad it
Yeah.
was. Like I'm on one side of the bed, she's on the other side of the bed. We're just playing away. Oh, I'm hungry. Let's go to Jack in the Box. We'd get in the car, drive over to Jack in the Box. They used to have like these grilled chicken salads at the time, which were really, really good. So we'd get 2 grilled chicken salads and a thing of curly fries, eat the curly fries on the way back home, get back, eat the salads, right back into it, and that was life, and it was good. But I love my kid and life now and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, those crazy kids. Sorry.
No, you don't have to
I envy them.
apologize at all. That's honestly part of the story of WoW is like, it's not just the game, it's the time in life that you experience it. Cause I touched on it in the last episode, and like, just, there's something so immersive about World of Warcraft in like just the way it presents the world. Like I mentioned it actually because the recording schedule for this is a little wonky. I was going to try not to like peek behind the scenes for this, but this is actually being recorded after the finale episode was already recorded. And I mentioned it in that episode, but I think it's applicable here for what we're just kind of talking about. The sense of scope and scale in these games, like in how the game presents the world to you, is just astounding. Like when, like, to bring it to talk specifically about Burning Crusade, when you walk through the dark portal, right, and it's just this huge like Goliath, and the steps are like huge. Like they really make you feel like this is something straight out of like a high fantasy, like just great, like the amount of grandeur almost. And in the behind the scenes documentary, they were talking about how the orcs here, because part of the Warcraft lore is that the orcs in Azeroth originally came from, not, I guess it was from Outlands technically, but from space.
Yeah,
they were
it
from
was
space,
Outland, but it was not called Outland
yeah.
originally. It was Jesus Christ, I should know what it is. I know a lot. Oh, Draenor. That's what it was. It was originally Draenor. It's the homeworld of the orcs and the ogres and the refuge of the Draenei. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, what happened? The reason it became Outland is because Ner'zhul, who would eventually become the Lich King as we know him, when he was an orc, he was similar to Gul'dan in that they were both warlocks. He was basically opening up tons and tons of portals, and that essentially destroyed Draenor and turned it into what we now know as Outland. So yeah, the orc, because he was opening portals and stuff like that for them to invade Azeroth, and the reason they're green is because they drank the blood of the demons and turned green. But the ones who didn't are the Mag'har, and those are like kind of the like dusty brownish, like reddish, kind of, not red, but like they're, I guess, like light brown, dusty brown looking orcs. Yeah. So yeah, I know a lot of lore for this particular world, and
hey, I'm not complaining, man. But I was going to say, like the orcs that came to Azeroth were an offshoot of these orcs, and they didn't have all the materials though that they would have had here. So that's why if you look at the orc structures on Azeroth, it's a lot of like giant, trees and like like logs and stone, and kind of like they don't look bad, but you can tell they're a little bit more ramshackled together. Like they're very kind of like, here's a wall, here's like a circle of stones type of thing. And here in Outlands, when you see orc structures, they're a lot more well put together. Like they have they're made out of metal, and it's like the structures are a lot more refined, and it's very clear they had the tools and the materials needed to build their structures here, whereas the orcs that kind of fell into Azeroth, as it were, needed to kind of figure shit out on the fly. So that's why I kind of like how they talked about it in the behind the scenes thing, like that visual difference in how the orcs appear in here, not just in terms of visuals, how they're kind of red, but like even their structures, like what would it be like if you weren't cut off from all of your technology type of thing. And I thought that was a really interesting way. And that's why when you look at like the dark portal, you can see how it was constructed and everything. And once again, just adding to that sense of scale and scope and grandeur. I want to throw it over to you quick, Mick. Like, do you agree with me on that? Like, do you think that WoW does a really good job at like making players feel that sense of scope and grandeur?
Definitely. I mean, the areas, particularly Hellfire Peninsula, it's just giant, and you
Mm-hmm.
really do feel like very small in comparison. Even if you have a ground mount, because obviously like you can't fly when you initially get there. You can't fly until 70, I think. You have to get to max level and then you can fly in Outland. But even on like foot on your mount, you're just like, this is so huge to traverse. And like you said, the portal's so giant. And especially when you first come through the portal and you've got, the forces of both the Horde and the Alliance are fighting the Burning Legion. And, they're just like, oh, go over to this Flight Master so you can go over to, your either Alliance base or your Horde base and get set up. And it's just, it really does feel like, oh shit, now we're in this, and
Mm-hmm.
I think they just do such a good job of that and expanding on their lore and just like little things that are just slightly referenced from like, oh, well, this was a small reference in like Warcraft 2. Now it's this whole like city that's been built and this whole like fortress. And it's what I think I love about Blizzard so much is their just excellent execution of their lore. And again, just like little small things that like, oh, well, here's a character that was mentioned in Warcraft 2 that, vanished or whatever. Now he's like the commander of the forces of the Alliance in Outland. And oh shit, he wasn't dead. He's just been here fighting off, demons for the last 20 years or whatever. So yeah, that scale is incredible, I think. And they just do such a great job of it. And it's definitely different than how a lot of things felt in vanilla WoW, where it's just like, oh man, because I feel like at some point for some people when they got to max level in vanilla, you're like, I'm hot shit. I've attuned to go fight this guy. I've done this to go fight that guy. But when you came through that dark portal, you realized how small you still really are, and it's cool in that regard.
This expansion also added a couple another thing into well, you know what, before I get into that, just something. No, we'll stick to talking about the world, and because we kind of started talking about the different races and then we just went off and started and just talked about the world, and that's fine.
Yeah,
But
tangent
before
land.
yeah, before I go back to the races and the two things that those races and the things that those races brought to the game, besides just a new starting location and new visuals and all that other stuff. I want to talk about one of the big things they added in this is that it's the sanctuary city, Shatrath.
Yeah,
Uh,
hell yeah.
yeah, it was the first time you had seen anything like that in WoW, where there's a centralized city that's not 100% central on the Outlands. It's pretty close though. It's a little bit farther south than central, but it's basically in the center of the world, and it is just a big location where both Horde and Alliance can meet up and hang out. And I mean, they can't talk to each other. Like I guess you could figure out if someone really took the time to figure out the language
I
differences, but
used to you would just like dance at each other or make like gestures at one another to be
yeah.
like fuck you. Essentially is what you were doing.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, and like Shatrath, I remember like so I kind of missed it during its heyday when I first showed up at it. I was like, I remember hearing about it. Like so when I first started playing, my buddy Tristan would tell me like, oh yeah, there's like Dalaran in Northrend is a sanctuary city and Shatrath is the one in Outlands, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like I was so excited to see each city, and Shatrath was the one that I remembered not like really being all that interesting to me because
Yeah.
it was very empty and it was very kind of like it felt very deserted. But once again, I did not play during its heyday, so everyone was going to always be in Dalaran. No one was going to show up in Shatrath anymore if everyone's up in Northrend,
Oh yeah. Well,
So
and basically that's what happened is like Dalaran and Wrath replaced Shatrath in that role because that was sort of like that was kind of the thing is in Shatrath you could get to any other major area that you needed to via portals. So if you needed to
mhm.
go to Orgrimmar, you could, like, because there was a portal to go to it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about all that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, if you
yeah.
needed to go to Undercity, you could, because there was the portal to go to it. And so yeah, like if you weren't there when BC was kind of the main thing, you wouldn't see it, because and that sort of has been the thing moving forward in every expansion, is like whatever the big major city relevant to that expansion, that's where the place to be is, and then all the other ones are just kind of empty.
Do you have any, like, I guess before we wrap up kind of like the segment of just talking about the world and environment and everything, what's your favorite zone in Outlands? And I
Ooh.
guess you could also expand that to if it's one of the starting zones for the new races, because those were new zones added to the game as well.
Oh, gee, that's a good question.
So it doesn't
Well,
have to be limited to Outland, is what I'm
yeah,
saying. Just a new zone in
okay.
Burning Crusade.
I really like the Ghostlands a lot, which is the level 10 to 20 area for the Blood Elves. You
Mm-hmm.
start in Eversong Woods, and then you go to the Ghostlands. But I really like the Ghostlands a lot. I think there's some really cool quests there. I like Silvermoon City as well. I think it's very cool. In Outland, I think my favorite area is probably Zangarmarsh. It's just really cool. Like, I'm tempted to say like Netherstorm, because it's like all super purple and broken and all that kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I like Zangarmarsh. It's neat. You've got like all the giant mushrooms, and um yeah, I think for Outland, Zangarmarsh is my favorite, but the Blood Elf areas, Ghostlands in particular, are my favorite. Just because I'm a lore junkie for this particular series and everything, and it's really cool because if you loved and played Warcraft 3, you're the asshole that made the Ghostlands what it is. Like, because in that game, when you play as the Scourge campaign, for those that don't know, in Warcraft 3, you play as each of the four main factions. So you'll play as the orcs,
Mm-hmm.
you'll play as the humans, you'll play as the night elves, and you play as the undead or the Scourge. Well, when you play as the Scourge, you destroy Silvermoon. You destroy that area and it turns into the Ghostlands. So walking around there and questing there and fighting like the different Scourge and the Nerubians and all the like giant spiders and all that kind of stuff, like it's kind of cool because like I remember that area in Warcraft 3 and I remember doing those quests. So it's just very cool to see it in through a different lens now. And it's like, oh, I remember the asshole that did it. He was me. Like, I'm the one who's responsible for this. Damn, I didn't know they were gonna make a whole game where they made me feel bad for killing all these elves. But here we are. So yeah, that's what I like. It's a super cool area. Like if I would level another character, I would take them to the Ghostlands for level 10 to 20 just to go through that area again.
Now, question. I when I was doing a little bit of research for this, I was a little confused. This is a lore question. Wasn't it Sylvanas and the Forsaken that it was the one that, like you said, it just attacked Silvermoon City?
So what happened was Sylvanas was the Ranger General of Silvermoon. So she was like the head ranger, the head hunter, whatever you want to call. In Warcraft 3, as Arthas, you kill her. He then in that game brings her back. He raises her as a banshee. Well, that of course is carried over into the WoW lore, pardon me, I'm getting ahead of myself. In Frozen Throne, the Lich King is slowly losing his control over different undead. One of the people that he loses control over is Sylvanas. Well,
Okay.
obviously, she fucking hates Arthas because he is responsible for making her what she is. He killed her and he made her undead, brought her back. But because she has her own free will now, she's no longer a slave to the Lich King. She then decides to found the Forsaken and basically recruits and finds other, free undead, so to speak, and they form their own thing. And that's what happens. The Blood Elves at this point, it's a little bit of a gray area. The reason they're part of the Horde is because of their connection to Sylvanas. Because Sylvanas was like a high up commander in, like they weren't blood elves at the time, they were high elves, because when they became blood elves, well, she was dead and a banshee at that point, so she's not part of that. But that's why there's the blood elves are in the Horde, is because of their connection to Sylvanas, because she made the pitch to Thrall to say, hey, these guys are cool, let them join us, because traditionally the elves were always with the Alliance, but because of events in Frozen Throne, they get really jaded against the Alliance, and Kael'thas joins up with Illidan. So it's one of those things where it's like they're part of the Horde, even though they're like their prince, their king, whatever, is working with Illidan, who we're trying to go kill. Well, that seems odd, don't you think? So yeah, it's a little kind of like muddy at first, but then it turns out it's like, oh no, Kael'thas is actually like crazy now, and he's not, the man anymore, and like, yeah, it's a whole thing. But that's the connection, and how the Blood Elves got added into the Horde, and like their connection to Sylvanas is because she was one of them before she died.
Okay.
It's a long way to answer your question. I apologize.
Well, that's why I was confused as to why they were part of us if Sylvanas is the one that like attacked them but it wasn't her.
No, it was Arthas.
It was Arthas controlling Sylvanas at the time.
Yes, because you kill her at like the gates of Silvermoon, then he brings her back and forces her to continue forward, I think. If I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I played Warcraft 3.
I covered like Warcraft in general a couple years ago with my buddy Jamie and I think his brother. Just because at the time I was like, well, there's not really much to cover in terms of like Warcraft 1, because that was so simplistic, and there wasn't really a lot of lore for it back then. But obviously with Orcs and Humans, and then, or that's the first one, I'm sorry, with the Warcraft 2 and then Warcraft 3, there's a lot of lore that they add to it from there. But real quick before we move on, my favorite area is Nagrand. I love what did you say? Sorry.
It's a very cool area too.
Yeah.
I like it.
I just love like jungle type of stuff, and I know that's not a jungle, it's kind of like plains almost.
Yeah.
But it's very kind of like any place that's green is just something that I love. And Nagrand is just these big wide open plains. And isn't Nessingwary there?
Yes. Yeah, he is, because it's like it's very similar to like the Thunder Bluff area. So yeah, he's there doing his great hunt, doing his thing, and that's also where you run into name is escaping me. Jesus. Homeboy who goes Grom Hellscream's kid.
Garrosh. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Garrosh.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was joking around on the Wrath episode where unless it's Thrall, I don't know who the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, Garrosh Hellscream, who's Grom Hellscream's kid. He eventually becomes war chief before he gets corrupted by the he gets corrupted by the Shah, and he forms the Iron Horde and goes back through. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
There's a lot of
He's
lore.
He's a bad
in WoW.
motherfucker though. The Garrosh to me is like one of the, I don't want to say like one of the best examples of what Blizzard could do and has consistently missed the mark on since then. Because they introduce him in Burning Crusade, and he's just like, he's sad, he's just like hanging out in Outland. He did not get corrupted because his father didn't let him drink the blood and all that kind of stuff, and he stayed in Outland, and so he's just like this really minor little character, like, and then he, you kind of help boost him back up, get him back into like, yeah, no, you're a Hellscream, like your father was this great hero who freed the Horde from the corruption of the demons, and then he becomes this big badass like general in Wrath of the Lich King, and then he becomes like sort of the hero of that story, and then he becomes the war chief, and then he becomes corrupted, and then he becomes the villain, and it's just he has this great character arc that they should have been doing like along the way with all the like other characters, and they
Mm-hmm.
didn't do it as much as they did with him, because his was like perfect. And they just I just always thought like it's a missed opportunity that they didn't do that with other characters, like make characters like, here's a guy that we introduce in Wrath, and by the time we get to like, you know, Warlords of Draenor, he's a big badass deal as well. And
Mm-hmm.
because they have a bad problem of killing off a lot of their characters.
Do they do the Goku shit and bring him back too, though?
No, not really. Like it's always that thing of like, you're at least with like the Horde, you're kind of like, all right, which one of these motherfuckers is going to become like the next big bad guy that we got to go after? Because it's happened. Like, if I had a nickel for every time that that's
Mm-hmm.
happened, I'd have two nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's still weird that it's happened twice.
What's that? That's a quote from something. What do I?
Oh, I can't remember. I've seen the quote 1,000.
I've seen that joke. Yeah.
But yeah, because like it like Garrosh, it happens with him where he becomes war chief, and then he becomes like the big bad guy that we got to beat. And then it happened with Sylvanas, where she becomes the war chief, and then we got to go beat her, and she becomes the big bad guy. Yeah, and it's just like, damn it, stop doing this to the Horde.
And I need to get. So I actually bought a WoW lore book, like talk about like the creation of the universe and shit, like the WoW.
Oh man, it's complex.
Yeah. I forget what it all was already. I was reading it. I kept like I would talk to Jamie about it. I'm like, all right, here's what I've learned. And it was literally not to tell him. He knew all this shit, but this is like literally just me repeating it so I can commit it to memory, which didn't fucking work because I don't remember it at all. Anyway, but all right, we got to move on though.
Yeah.
We've been tangenting plenty. What I want to touch on next is the two specific things. There's a lot of things the new race has brought, but one of the big things that was in original World of Warcraft was that Alliance could only be Paladin, could only play the Paladin class, and Horde could only play the Shaman class. It was a class that was unique to each faction. Well, in Burning Crusade, with the addition of the Blood Elves and the addition of the Draenei, it allowed the opposing factions to finally have their chance to play these different classes. So Blood Elves could be a Paladin, and Draenei could be a Shaman. So finally, Alliance was able to play Shaman as the Draenei or to play Paladin as the Blood Elves. And I thought it was interesting from a lore perspective, like in the behind the scenes thing, they were talking about how like they really pondered like how the hell are we going to like the Blood Elves kind of they're almost like anti-heroes in a weird sense where like they're kind of evil but they're kind of not. So how are we going to like take this race and make them a paladin when they really don't want to work for the light? And their logic I thought was kind of interesting was that the Blood Elves almost hate the light so much that they want to bend it to their will, use the magic to bend the light to their will, and that's how they become paladins. Like the way they described it is that Blood Elves became paladins almost in spite of the all the attributes of paladins, because they're just so mad at the world. It was their ultimate like payback was like, well, fuck you. If we can't, you believe in all this shit, we're gonna bend this shit to our will and do the same thing. I thought that was a really interesting way to do it. Like, I'm not saying interesting in like a passive aggressive way either. I think it's genuinely like I think that's a cool way to do it. Now for the Draenei, I didn't get far enough in the document. They barely even touched on it for the Draenei for like the story reasons as to why the Draenei are able to do shaman stuff, other than the fact that they do crystals and shit. And that's the only. But they didn't even say explicitly anything. I was like, okay, are they just like hippies and that's why they're shamans? Like, I don't know.
If I remember correctly, it's something about their connections that they made with the orcs originally when they came to Draenor, because the orcs were shamans originally before the like Gul'dan and everybody was like, let's become warlocks, and became all corrupted by demons and shit. So if I remember correctly, that's where it comes from, is like the original like bonds that they made with like the orcs when they first got there. But I can't remember. The Draenei are like such a sore they're such a sore subject in WoW history and lore, because it was kind of like Blizzard was like, how far can we fucking push this? We're gonna make them like aliens and have their like main city is a fucking crashed spaceship, and it was just like people didn't jive with it. They didn't dig it, and I don't have a problem with them, but I understand where people felt like it was a little too much, because like the Blood Elves made sense, but the Draenei just
Yeah.
were a little too, I think, a little too. They went Chris Metzen did a little bit too much cocaine and was like, "Fucking space goats," and yeah. So I think that's why people have a problem with them.
I remember my buddy, his name's Andy. He's never been on the show, but I remember he made the same joke. They're essentially just space cows.
Yep, they
And,
straight up are.
and I was like, oh, that's kind of mean, but I get it. I did like that though, what they were talking about in the behind the scenes, just trying to come up with like, how do we make this like them look, like how, like visually, like what do we do for this? Because we want to make it where it's grounded enough that you're not walking into like a Draenei spaceship and being like, what the fuck is this? I
Yeah,
don't understand
and
anything.
it's powered by like a big being of light. Yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
Naru, and yeah, it's a whole thing.
But also, how do we make it seem alien without actually, being fully alien? I thought that was
Yeah,
that's a unique challenge that they have to really worry about. So I totally get that.
yeah. No, I agree, and that's where I'm like, I they were definitely experimenting with this expansion, because I don't think they really knew what they wanted to add for the Alliance. I don't think they had something that they felt that made a lot of sense, but I know that one of the decisions, or one of the reasons why they put the Blood Elves on the Horde, is because at that point, all the quote unquote pretty uh, races were on the Alliance, and all the quote unquote ugly or monstrous looking races were on the Horde. So I
Mm,
know that they specifically wanted to mix that up and say, well, we're going to put the prettiest of the pretty characters on the Horde, and we're going to put like these other weird looking characters on the Alliance. Because yeah, they wanted to mix it up. So I don't know that they had a really solid idea, and they just kind of came up with the Draenei, and they were like, let's develop this some. But I agree that it's pretty cool that they were trying something different and experimenting and saying, well, how do we make this work? Like, that's a cool challenge, and I think they did a good job with it.
I don't hate the Draenei. I don't know. It does kind of look weird, especially like they do a good job of making it look cool. But I do think the big issue is, and it you can kind of feel it too. It doesn't feel like it definitely feels more like an afterthought, kind of like
Yeah,
how in like Mists of Pandaria and stuff like that. Like all of a sudden there's this new panda race type of thing, which I don't know the lore reason for them. I just know, I from what I remember, this was a while ago, is that they were almost made as like a joke,
it was.
and
It
they're
was an
like,
April Fool's joke.
yeah, and then all of a sudden like, nope, this is lore now, this is canon, and so it kind of feels a little bit like the Drain. I kind of feel a little bit like that, where it's like this was something that was a joke, that like just went a little bit too far, and they take it seriously. Like, I'm not trying to say they didn't try, but the Drain I always kind of felt to me like it just didn't mesh well with the fantasy that Warcraft is.
I
Even though they
agree.
go to outer space and shit like that, like, the orcs are from outer space, like it's not like going to space is something that's completely foreign to the fantasy of Warcraft. But the Draenei just feel just like just a bridge slightly too far. They just went just a little bit over the edge.
No, I agree. The way I would have done it is I would have probably leaned into kind of and when you look at them, they kind of look like this anyway, but they look like tieflings from D&D. Or at
I could
least
see
they
that.
have a lot of similarities to tieflings, because at least like they could have horns, they have tails, they have hooves. So why not just lean into that, especially in a franchise, in a series where there's a lot of demons and things like that? Why not just make them somehow like demons, mated with something and these are just uncorrupted demons or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I think that probably would have gone over a little bit better had they done that and avoided like so they came from another planet that was like far away and they got on their spaceship. And it's like, I think if they had avoided that and just leaned into like, oh, well, no, these are just uncorrupted demons is what they are. Like, this is like, or like demons and some other race like mated and this was the result of it. Again, just like lean more into like the tiefling aspect, and I think that probably would have gone over better and people would have been like, okay, yeah. But I where I agree, where I'm like, yeah, it's not unusual that space is a part of this. It's maybe not the giant spaceship powered by the big being of light. Maybe we didn't go that route.
Yeah. So to continue on a little bit with these two classes, though, that these race, like, because once again, tangents galore in this. I know it's a little bit all over the place, but
my apologies.
No, you don't. Sincerely, you don't have to apologize. I'm enjoying the conversation. Also, learning a lot about WoW lore, which is
holy shit. There's
which
so
is
much
fun. Out of the two, when you played this, did you like the fact that they gave the races to the opposite factions, or were you kind of bummed that maybe, like, I could see a criticism of it? Like, I don't personally feel this because I don't like to miss out. Definitely a little bit of FOMO there.
Yeah.
But I do think that there you could make the argument that by getting rid of that, by having the one unique race for each faction, kind of gets rid of a little bit of that originality, that little bit of that specialness.
I never have had like a huge problem with that. I've always thought it was strange that certain races couldn't be certain classes. I always thought that was a little odd because I know that there's in a sense there's like story reasons for it, because I think like over the years they've expanded like the paladin class a little bit more, where like, well, Tauren can now be paladins and
Yep.
and stuff like that. But I've just always kind of thought that it was odd that and again, I get it to an extent, but it never bothered me. I never thought that like, oh no, you shouldn't the horde should only have the shamans and the alliance should only. I never had an issue with it. I thought it was cool but I'm also the believer of like, you should be able to make whatever the fuck you want to make. If you want to make like a blood elf shaman, you should be able to, because from like a lore perspective or whatever, it's like, well, why couldn't they go like, why couldn't a blood elf decide, well, hey, I'm gonna go and learn from these shaman? Like, that's a thing that could happen in theory, so why not let them do it? So that's kind of where I'm at with it, where I never had an issue with it. I actually thought it was kind of cool.
I'm with you on that. I don't have an issue with it. I just think that you could at least, like, that's an argument to be had, or a conversation to be had at the very least. Now, did you prefer Blood Elf Paladin or Shaman, Draenor Shaman, or Draenei Shaman? I can't even speak. Holy crap!
I liked Blood Elf Paladin.
I feel like most people did.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. The shaman class, at least at that time for me, it felt like a lot. It felt I couldn't quite, because shaman's one of those classes that has like, again, at the time, and this is my opinion, I'm sure people who've played more shaman could argue or explain it to me a little bit better. They always felt like one of those like classes that was more of a utility class. Like, they never felt like they had a distinct role, where like paladin, it was like, yeah, you could make like a retribution paladin and deal damage, but the reality was like, you made a protection paladin and you were a tank and you knew what your role was, which is be a tank. So that's kind of why I liked paladin, because I liked very clear and defined roles when it came to these games.
Like I said before, I played hunter mostly. I was an orc hunter. Played that, like, I forget why I chose orc, because I think at the time I wanted to. I've always been kind of this way, where it's like, I when I first got into it, I did get all of the expansions right off the bat. At the time, it was up to Wrath though, and I remember rolling an Orc Hunter though, because I'm like, well, I need to experience Nilla the way it was intended to be experienced. I can't play a Blood Elf until I level up one of the original character classes,
Yeah,
or one
that's
of the
fair.
original. And even though it makes no difference at that point, because like you're experiencing about the same thing anyway, so there's no point in, it'd be silly it'd be silly to. Uh, but yeah. I want to move on though quick to I want to talk a little bit about the music for this. Um, the music in this game, man, like I've said it in other episodes, I'm bad at describing it, like how it feels or whatnot, but I want to touch on it because the behind the scenes that came with the special edition had devoted a lot of time to the music and sounds of this expansion,
Yeah.
and just talking about how, like, working with a full orchestra for this, how much Foley work was done for all the sound effects of just like running on grass and swords clanging together. But it really got me thinking just how impressive the sound design is for this game. I'm not saying like like they chose a different sound effect for every single possible instance that a sword could hit or this and that. They didn't need to do that. The gameplay animations are pretty simple and all that other stuff, but it's really impressive the amount of sound work that they did. And something that I thought was interesting, like most times games have like one composer for it. This game had 3 on-staff composers. They outsourced one composer outside the company, and some of the sound staff also wrote some music for the game. They had essentially 5 different composers working on this game, and they were talking about how like the amount of music for just like Silver Moon and what's the Draenei starting area?
Um, Exodar is their
Exodar.
yeah.
That's their city, right?
Yeah.
Exodar. But the amount of music just for their opening area and the Blood Elves opening area is like, it's more than the entirety of Nilla or something like that. Like, it was the amount of music they pumped into this was just insane. It was very clear that like the 3 years after Nilla launched, how popular the game was. They're like, well, let's just pump that money back into the game, and it shows. Like, there was this game. It's the reason I felt comfortable doing like an episode on each expansion is that there really is like, there's so much more content in all of these. They're like, it's basically a full nother game
Yeah.
that's just
It's
tacked on top
impressive.
of it. It's nuts. But I don't really have much else to say about the music. I have one other question to bring up for you after we're done talking about the music. But before we do that, any thoughts from you on the music at all?
I think it's amazing, and all the areas feel so incredibly different, and it's just, again, as you said, the sounds and the amount of work that they put into it, because when you break it down, there's really only about 10 new areas in the game, because like Eversong Woods and Ghostlands are the same general area that's just broken off by level. Same with the Zero Mist Isle and Blood Mist Isle, same general area. And then you've got Hellfire, Zangarmarsh, Terrakar, Nagrand, Blade's Edge, Netherstorm, and Shadow Moon. So when you look at that and you look at like every area has this distinct sound and music and feel to it,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. And it's only 10 areas, but that much music, unbelievable. They really, really understood, like, here's this opportunity that we have, let's knock it out of the park.
Absolutely, man. They really did a fantastic job with it. And I wish I could be like it. They talk about in the documentary as well how like the type of music they wrote for it wasn't necessarily meant to like stand out. It's meant to create ambiance. So you're not going to necessarily go around humming the music for it, but like it's really well written music in the sense that it just builds the ambiance to the world around you, makes you feel like you're like it fits the theming of each zone really well. So just a great soundtrack. A lot of work was put into the soundtrack. And I meant to touch on this earlier. I'm going to this is one of the last things I want to talk about, unless there's other topics you want to get into, Mick. But I should have brought this up when we were talking about the gameplay and exploring the world and everything and the different classes. But dungeons. What are some of your favorite like dungeons in Burning Crusade? I didn't really get to play a lot of them. I think Hellfire Ramparts was the one in Hellfire Peninsula. I played that one.
Hellfire Citadel. Yeah.
Citadel. What wasn't Ramparts one?
Oh yeah. You're right. Citadel was the higher level one. That's right. My bad.
Okay. Well, it's all right because I didn't play a lot of the instances and dungeons. I'm gonna have to look up a list of them real quick because I don't know them all too well. But yeah, do you have any like favorites that stick out to you?
Caverns of Time is super cool. It's
That
not
is
in
very
Outland.
cool.
Yeah, it's not in Outland. But it was introduced in Burning Crusade. And just I'll try and be brief when I describe it. But the cool thing about it was you're able to just go back and go play through a moment in lore and assure that the things that happened continue to happen as they should. Otherwise, like it's like a paradox and it's a whole thing. So like I would be remiss if I could not say if I didn't say Caverns of Time, because it's very, very cool. And you're just fighting like dragons at the end of it, but getting to see just events from like Warcraft 1 happen, or this was an event that needed to happen in Warcraft 3. Like the biggest one that I really liked in BC is the escape from Durnhold Keep, where you have to ensure that Thrall is able to escape Durnhold, which ultimately sets him on his path to becoming war chief and setting off everything to happen, as it were. But you have the infinite dragon flight, which is like this mysterious group of dragons that are like manipulating moments in time and changing slight things, like for example the Durnhold Keep, Taretha Foxton set off a diversion that allowed Thrall to escape, so the infinite dragonflight kidnapped her, so she couldn't make that. So the bronze dragonflight comes in and asks you, the player, hey, you need to do this. It is crucial to like everything that this happens as it should. So yeah, Caverns of Time is probably my favorite thing that's introduced. I was originally on the Wrath of the Lich King talk because I would have talked about Stratholme, but I won't do that here. So hopefully somebody will talk about that.
Wait, wasn't Strath in Nilla?
It was, but you have to go in Wrath of the Lich King. You do the calling of Stratholme, which leads to the version that we see in Vanilla WoW. But yeah, I also really liked Coilfang Reservoir.
That's the one you have to swim underwater to get to, right?
And that's why I like it.
Wild.
Yeah, because it's just super cool, because it's like, so the way that they did it in Burning Crusade was kind of similar to some things that they introduced towards the end of Vanilla. Like Hellfire Citadel, you've got there's multiple parts to it.
Yes, that's what I was confused with. It's the ramparts, the Hellfire Ramparts, the Blood Furnace, and then there is the Shattered Halls.
Yeah. So the way it's done is it's kind of like broken off depending on your level. So for Coilfang, you've got the Slave Pens, you've got the Underbog, the Steam Vault, and then the Serpentine Cavern is the big raid, which is where you go fight Lady Vosh and all that kind of stuff. But like Slave Pens is cool, Underbog is super, super cool. Steam Vaults is kind of meh because it's like a lot of gnome stuff. I'm not a big fan of gnomes, but I again, I like Coilfang because it's in Zangarmarsh, which is just like visually to me, it's the most interesting area. But yeah, like I said, just getting to like swim, because that's a thing you didn't do in dungeons and stuff before. It's like, oh, you got to swim down and swim through here and do this, and I really like it a lot. I think it's super cool.
It was easy to get lost trying to find your way to that place too.
Yes.
Like that's something that I found so interesting about like old school WoW, is that they really make you work just to get to some of those dungeons and everything.
Oh yeah, like, if you took a wrong turn, you were like, where the hell is the rest of the group?
Many a time
Underdog though.
Well, then they did have the summoning stones, which you, as long as two people were there, you could then pick a person and summon them, and bring them to the stone, which was very helpful. But that would still require two people to get to the actual place. They had to know where they were going in order to get to it. But still, I always thought that was cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones that I'm looking at the list now just to make sure I'm not forgetting any. Tempest Keep is pretty cool as well. That one's neat. It's a Netherstorm. And eventually, like you go into the Eye and you fight Kael'thas, which is cool. And like obviously, Black Temple is just. I mean, you fight Illidan, and he's like, "You are not prepared," and yeah, he's just a dick, and you get to beat his ass, and it's great.
I didn't get to do any of these raids either, man. I missed out on. I did all my raiding in Wrath, and then I never did any other raids in any other expansions whatsoever. I was one and done type of guy, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
so I didn't do the raids in BC until later.
okay.
Because similar to you, like I really started raiding in Wrath, and then post that, like you could go back and like, I would go back and like do them either solo or, get a couple of friends and we'd go through just because it was like content that we hadn't seen or hadn't done. Because man, it was hard to get 25 fucking people that knew what to do and could like get through. Holy shit. Like again, like I mostly did it in Wrath and we did Nax Ramus. I want to say I only ever got past one or two bosses in Nax Ramus at the time. Because again, it was brutal when it was like the live time. But like I said, some of these I went back through and did just to see the story or see the area or stuff like that. But I did a lot of the dungeons. I just didn't hit a lot of the raids at the time because it was, I just didn't have that kind of a guild at that point. I had not grown strong enough at the WoW.
Well, I guess I don't know. So was Burning Crusade when they first jumped it down to 10 and 25 man raids? I could have sworn, because I know in Nilla it was 40 man raids was like the big thing. So BC was when they bumped it down to 10 to 25.
It was just 25, and then Wrath, I think they swapped it over to 10. Yeah,
okay.
It was different types of gear that you could get. Like the stronger gear was 25, and then the 10 man, it was supposed to be easier, and the gear, it was still good gear, but it wasn't as good. But yeah, the 40 mans, I didn't ever do any of that stuff. But my brother did, and so I've heard many a tale of, oh yeah, man, you had to attune and then you had to get this. And if one motherfucker if you pulled wrong, starting all over. So yeah, I've heard many a tale of the nightmare that was the 40 man raid.
Oh, dude, like I can only imagine. It was tough enough with 25 people, let alone 40.
Yeah, 25 is still brutal.
I did a lot of 25 man raids back in college, a lot of 25 man raids. But it's crazy because it's kind of, actually in a weird sense, kind of similar to podcasting, where it's a bunch of people setting aside time for something. Honestly, it's important in the sense of like mental health because it's giving you something to do and something fun to like focus on. But like if you really think about it, like I know I used to make fun of my friends who'd be like, "Oh, I can't play tonight. I can't hang out tonight. I have a raid," or something like that. And then once I started playing WoW, I was like, "I can't hang out tonight. I got a raid."
No, it's real shit, man. Like it really, at some points, it felt like it became a full-time job to try and be in like
if you're a guild leader, man, it was.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh man, I was always like on like sort of the cusp of being like a bigger member in a guild because at the end of the day, like my wife and I would largely just play just to have fun with each other and like quest together and do our thing and like play with my brother and his wife some. But we were in one of those guilds that like, it was start trying to be a little more serious, but never one of those like you had to apply and there was websites and like we're trying to get world firsts. Like we were never even close to a guild like that because that was like harder to get than a a job at the Pentagon or something, you know? It was holy shit. Like it's one of those things, like if you were that level of raider in WoW, I legitimately think you should be able to put that on a resume somewhere, because if someone knows, then they were going to be like, "Oh, we definitely need to hire you because you've got some dedication."
I was trying to think, like, our guild was pretty good at the time. Like, so I got into it because my buddy Tristan was in it, and he was a pretty well established member of it.
That's how I got in mine, was my brother.
Yeah, even then, man, I was never like the best player on. I was better than some others. I remember I was always proud of myself where I was in like the top 5 of DPS, because I was a hunter, and I was consistently in like the top 5 DPS for quite some time. But then actually, you know what? There's other times where I was always like, I would be really trying hard and I could barely get above the tanks. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? You have to figure out your rotation and everything. It was just,
and that's like, dude, you had to like study and like,
yeah.
yeah, it was a holy God.
It's funny. I've talked more about the mechanics of raiding in this than I did in my Wrath episode, where I actually did raid. I didn't do any raiding here in Burning Crusade.
I will say this, and I just because I think it needs to be said, because I've played a good bit of Final Fantasy 14. I've played a lot of WoW, and I want to say, in my experience, looking back, I don't know how it is. I can't speak to how it is today in WoW, and I can't like super speak to how it used to be in Final Fantasy 14. But I will say my experience in doing dungeons and higher count dungeons in Final Fantasy 14, like raids, things like that. Way better experience in Final Fantasy 14 than it was in WoW. Because in WoW, some people are motherfuckers, man, and oh man, I can't tell you the number of times I got into online arguments with people and was like so pissed off and so mad because like the whole time they're just giving you shit about how you're not good enough and you're not doing this right and you're not doing that right. And it's like, bro, there's only so many fucking ways to hit the buttons. But
yeah,
in my experience in Final Fantasy 14, doing dungeons and raids and stuff there, way better. People are way nicer. They're way more patient. They're way happier to say like, oh, here's the mechanic. This is what we need to do to be successful. I don't know if that's because like Final Fantasy has like the sprout system where you can obviously identify that someone is a newer player. And WoW doesn't really have that. You know, you couldn't tell that somebody was a newer player or whatever. But I just wanted to put that out there, that in Final Fantasy 14, my dungeon and raiding experience, way more positive, way less toxic than WoW. But I also was playing WoW at sort of the peak of its popularity and the height of its popularity, and where there was a huge emphasis on dungeons and raiding and doing really well, because the better you did, the better you could advance in the game, because there at that point there was a lot of content that you did not get to see if you weren't a certain level, if you didn't have certain gear, if you weren't like a certain item level, and you know, things like that. You just didn't get to see the content because you couldn't do it. It was too difficult. So I understand it, but at the same time, it was a very unpleasant experience.
Yes, yes, it was. But all right, is there anything else you would like to touch on before we wrap up this episode, Mick? I feel like we've talked about the Draenei, we've talked about the Blood Elves, and we talked about the new things they brought to the table. The visual, like, everything about Outland, a lot of the lore. But is there anything else that that you would like to touch on before we wrap up this episode?
I'm trying to think.
Any PvP? That's something I didn't really bring up a lot of PvP because I feel like I brought it up last episode, and if you brought it up once, it's kind of it's PvP.
I was never big. I never did a lot of PvP. I do
Same.
not. Part of that is I was a paladin, and at the time, I don't think paladins were quite good to do PvP. Paladins were more aimed at doing dungeons and raids and things of that nature, because they were tanks. Like, yeah, you could be a retribution paladin in PvP, but I didn't do that shit. I don't have the temperament to do
Same.
PvP, to be perfectly honest. I'd get way too pissed off. I did a little bit of like battlegrounds and stuff like that, just the capture the flag type thing, and it was fine. It's not me. Again, I don't have the temperament for it, so I didn't do a lot of PvP. I just really enjoyed playing this game with my wife. It's one of those
That's so
things.
cool, man.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, and we bonded over plenty of stuff, but it was that thing that, when we first started dating, we kind of got each other in deeper to the other's interests. Like, she was like super into anime, and I watched like a little bit of anime, but wasn't like super into it. But she got me more into it, just as like I was very into pro wrestling, and she had watched it and liked it a little bit, but didn't know a ton about it, and I got her more into it. But WoW was the thing that we both got to do together and kind of be on equal footing. Like, I knew the lore, but in terms of like the game and the journey of like going through Burning Crusade, we did that together. So that was really, really cool, and just a part of our relationship that I just look back at those times and I just smile. It was such a great time. And thinking about this game, it just transports me to a different point in my life, because at the time, we moved into a townhome with a few of my friends, so we had like 3 roommates, and we were in this tiny room, this town room, and at one point, she was just going to school, I was working at GameStop, then she got a job at Best Buy, I got a job in addition to GameStop working at Best Buy, excuse me. And then I started working at a LAN center as well. So I had 3 jobs at one point.
Wow.
None of them were full time. So that was part of why I had 3 jobs. But at the LAN center, we would just play like WoW together and have a great time. And ultimately, World of Warcraft kind of led to the closure of that LAN center, because the guy who was like the owner / manager got like obsessed with WoW.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't growing the business anymore, was just sitting around playing WoW like straight up like 12-14 hours a day.
That would do it.
Yep, he was just doing it. So I'm like sitting there like ringing people up, trying to like run the shop and everything, and he's just over at the first computer just playing WoW. Like, he was so deep into it, he would actually sell, like, people would come in LAN Center, they would also play WoW, and we would all, and like everybody was kind of on the same server. He would sell gold to them for cash.
Wow.
Like, that's how deep in he got, man. Because he played a priest, so he always got in groups and got in raids and all that. Because at that time it was like that's what people needed.
Yeah, heals or tanks.
Yeah, he he got heavy into it, and and ultimately it's also the thing of like, LAN centers were kind of going the way of the dodo, simply because more and more people had access to high speed internets and Xbox 360s and things like that. So they weren't as like, prevalent as they used to be. But no, I just think about stuff like that. I just think about like working in the LAN center and looking at him playing WoW for 10-12 hours a day or whatever, and just being like, gee, I wonder why the business isn't growing. So yeah, like when I think about Burning Crusade, that's why, like, when you asked me, you're like, oh, will you talk about BC? I was like, absolutely. Because Wrath is the fanboy, is the Warcraft fanboy in me, but BC is the, like, I'm transported back to a time in my life where it was like, it was fun and cool, and it really was like just going on an adventure with my wife, and then like my brother and like his wife, and some friends. So it always holds such a special place in my heart, and it's so crazy to me that in 3 years, that's fucking 20 years ago. Like, where does the time go?
It's wild, dude.
Like, it's crazy to me that WoW came out 20 years ago now. Like, vanilla came out, because I distinctly remember I'm going on a long tangent. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I like I said, I distinctly remember like when Blizzard was like slowly putting information out on their website about what, Vanilla WoW was gonna be. Like they would, like, and here's the Forsaken, and they would tell you like the classes that they could be and like their abilities. Is like, oh well, they have like the cannibalize ability, so they can eat the corpse to regain their health, and it's like, oh, that's kind of like in Warcraft 3. And at the time, the only MMO style games that I had played were Moos and Muds, which were like
Yeah.
text games, basically. So I understood the idea of like playing online with other people, but the scale of what WoW would be, I couldn't process it, like I was saying earlier in the episode. But it's just it's wild to me to see how far WoW has come. And like my brother is literally the biggest WoW fan on the face of this planet. Like that is the game the man has played more than anything else. He has every single character max level. Every single class you can do, he's got it
Wow.
max level. Like I need to ask him how many hours. I think it's
Do a slash played and see what
yeah,
the
I'm
total
gonna ask.
count is.
I don't know if he'll answer right now, but I'm gonna text him and ask.
Maybe we'll have an answer before the episode wraps up. We'll have to find out.
We will see. But it's going to be a lot. And it's just like I said, I've always loved Blizzard stuff. I love the Warcraft lore. They've lost me over the past couple of expansions, but part of that's Final Fantasy pulled me in. Part of that is just, man, I ain't got any time.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where people have asked me too before to like cover like Final 14 and whatnot, and I'm like, I don't have time to start an MMO like and seriously try it out. Like World of Warcraft it hit me at the perfect time.
Yeah.
And like I can't really say too many final thoughts on Burning Crusade because like it really, I didn't experience it, like I jumped straight to Wrath. But like just kind of thoughts on WoW in general. It just hit me at the perfect time where I could play all this, where I could experience, like, even if I didn't play a lot of Burning Crusade, I still got to experience it only like a year or so after it came out. Which, if you think about it, it's nuts. Burning Crusade came out in 2007. Wrath came out in 2008.
It's crazy, right?
That is a crazy fast turnaround time between expansions. Now
Yeah.
it's every 2 years, which is, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that it's ever since Wrath, it's been 2 years on a consistent basis of expansions. Like, just looking at the list, right? Hold on, let me see if I can find it even. I did see a list of all the different expansions, and it was just wild to see. It's gonna drive me nuts. I'm gonna try to find it real quick and find all the. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. You have Burning Crusade in 07, Lich King in 08, Kata 2010, Pandaria 2012, Warlords of Draenor in 2014, Legion in 16, Battle for Azeroth in 18, Shadowlands in 2020, Dragonflight in 2022, and then the one that just came out this year, The War Within, which came out in August in 2024. So it is like a brand new, a whole new game in the series. I have, oh my gosh, who knows? Like I said, I've been debating jumping in. Maybe I'll just start a new character in New WoW just to see what it's like now.
It has changed a bit, but I do sort of like, they've streamlined it in terms of like level. But I do like how they've changed things to where you sort of get to choose where you want to go. If you want to go do vanilla kind of content, you can do that. If you want to go do Wrath, you can do that. If you want to go to BC, like, so they've made it to where you can do that. You have that sort of option of like, well, I'm really familiar with this area, I want to go and play there. They've made it so that you can. By the way, I just got a response from my brother.
Oh shit.
I'll read so I said, how many hours have you played WoW? And he said, hours, question mark, hours, question mark. I said, all right, total playtime, because I thought he was being a dick. He said, about 3 years. He says it's like 26,000 hours or so, but it's been a while since I last checked. So yeah, he's played a lot of this game.
That is so funny.
Still plays it every day, basically.
That's funny. That's funny.
He loves him some WoW, man. But I will say, WoW is the reason why Final Fantasy 14 is where it's at, because the head producer for 14, Yoshi P, is not made any bones about it. He wanted to adopt a lot of things that WoW did because he recognized the level of success that it is and the level of excellence that it's achieved for so many years. And he's like, so that's the blueprint you follow. You follow what they're doing because that's the measure of success. So that's what he did, and has incorporated a lot of stuff into 214, and it's made it a fantastic game. Whenever you want to talk about Final Fantasy 14, you let me know. We'll talk about that too.
Maybe instead of downloading WoW, I'll download 14 and we'll go from there. We'll see.
My friend, did you know?
Did you know? What a great way to loop it all back to how we started, and a great way. What a perfect segue to close it out. A good callback. But all right, I think that will do it for this episode, though, Mick. This was a wonderful conversation about Burning Crusade. Thank you so much for joining me, man. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. As usual, where can the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote?
Oh boy. So you can find me kind of the place that I've been telling people, especially with sort of like I don't want to say gray area. A lot of people are leaving different platforms for social media, so it's a little bit.
If you're still on Twitter, you don't have to feel bad about it.
But
I got off of it for my mental health. Being straight up honest, like it was it was torpedoing my mental health.
Yeah, when I was heavily streaming, I would use it just to kind of like talk to different streaming friends and put out that hey guys, I'm streaming. But I haven't really used I used to use it extensively to find different voice gigs and audition for different stuff. But there's been just a massive change over the past couple of years or year and a half or so that it's made that next to impossible. So I've largely stopped using it. So I always tell people, hey, I'm on Instagram, that Mick Arcade, that's like where I'm most active. I'm on like Blue Sky and Threads and stuff like that, but I'm not like super active yet. I'm trying to. I do have a Twitch channel, Mick Arcade. At some point I'd like to stream again if possible, but again, just that's tough with a toddler. It's finding when you do have the free time, it's tough to pull it off. But I am actually about to start doing a D&D campaign over on Playotic. We are going to be doing Escape from Avernus, which is kind of like a mix between Fury Road and Escape from LA, Escape from New York kind of feel to it. It's going to be a group of evil aligned characters doing an adventure across the 9 hells in D&D. I'm really excited for it. It's a really cool crew of people. They're really talented. They're really funny, and we're going to have some cool guests. And I'm really, really pumped for it. I think that'll run for a couple of months or so. It's not going to be super long. But we'll be playing that on Tuesday nights on Playotic on Twitch. And that's kind of the only thing I've got really coming down the pipe. I mean, I'm always looking for voice work and jobs. And so if you like, the sound of my voice, hit me up. I'm always looking for new opportunities. I'm always looking to try stuff. And, Doorway to Nightmare is a thing that I almost consistently have some sort of work that I've done for them. They're on YouTube. It's horror and mystery stories, and it's a lot of fun. It's run by a couple of really great people, and they provide me with extremely regular voice work, which is always a blast to do. So if you want to hear me play either a psychopath or an old man, that is where you can hear me do that, because that's all they have me play, it seems.
Nothing wrong with that. Old man voice is easy.
Every time I play an old man, an angel gets its wings.
Yeah, it's every single time.
If I had a nickel,
I would have a lot of nickels for every time I played an old man. Oh my God. Like at least, so if they send me 5 scripts, like 2 are old men, 3 are 3 are psychos, and sometimes 1 is an old man psycho. So I don't know why. I asked him once. I was like, "Why do you always give me the crazy people?" And because like sometimes I'll just like see like here's the different roles, and I'll see one. I'm like, "Oh, I hope that's me," and it's not me because I'm playing the old man. And I'm just like, and for those that are unaware, I am not an old man, as you could hear by the sound of my voice.
By your youthful voice.
Yes, I'm 37 years old. I'm not
37 years young.
Yes, true. Good point. So, but no, it's a lot of fun. Doorway to Nightmare. It's a blast. They're great.
Go check all of that out, listeners. I'm a huge fan of Mick's work. I actually am really excited to see that D&D campaign. I've been recently playing myself, and as a little quick shout out to my own stuff that's gonna go. I'll go into more detail in just a moment. I started a D&D campaign with my friends that I don't record like the. Excuse me. Okay, there we go. I don't record like the audio of us playing the game, but I do recap episodes, bonus episodes over on the Patreon of the events that have been occurring in our D&D campaign. So listeners can follow along with the story and the events of what's happening. Plus, that way I can send the audio to my friends, and that way if they need a refresher as to like, hey, what the hell happened last time when we played? This is what the hell happened last time when we played. So, but yeah. I guess as for my own stuff, to segue that into the actual plugs is where you can find me online and what I promote and all that good stuff. So I'm on social media, Twitter, no longer anymore, but I'm so used to that. The muscle memory is real. Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitch, @StillLoadingPod on all those locations, @StillLoadingPodcast on YouTube. If you want to support the show, you can do so in a handful of ways. Easiest way is to give a 5-star rating and review on whichever podcasting app you're using. It helps more people find the show, and it would really mean a lot to me. There is a way to get a lot of bonus content. If you like what you hear, you want to hear more, there is a patreon.com/stillloadingpod. Like I mentioned with the D&D campaigns, that is at the $4 level. At the $4 level, you get 2 mini bonus episodes a month, plus access to plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode, plus month. I'm doing this all out of order. Normally I just go from 1 to 5, one from the $1 tier and up, but starting at 4, since I mentioned this thing beforehand. But you also get episodes earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which helps guide the direction of the show. For $1 a month, you get the access to early episodes and patron voting rights and all that stuff. For $3 a month, you get the patron shout outs that you heard and the voting rights, everything before. And then I already mentioned the $4 stuff. And then for $5 a month, this is like the worst ad read I've ever fucking done in my life. So if any of this made any goddamn sense to you, god damn it, give me $1.
Give the man $1. You see, he's having a hard time here. Give him
I'm coughing up a storm. But for $5 a month, you get all the other stuff: the patron shout outs, the bonus episodes, the episodes earlier, the patron voter rights, all that stuff. And you also get a monthly movie podcast, which at the time this episode comes out, it is still bonding. My James Bond monthly movie podcast has now ended, and I'm going to be starting up Still Family, which is my monthly Fast and Furious movie podcast, where all my friends who join me aren't just friends, they're family. I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited for that series. I'm actually scheduling, the time we're recording this, I'm actually scheduling the first recording session for that. I'm hoping to have it be out in December. If not, it'll start in January for sure. But it is a monthly movie podcast, and the Still Bonding ones, for example, are about 3 hours long on average. Some are 2.5, some are 4.5, but on
that
average.
GoldenEye episode was great.
Yes, Mick was on the GoldenEye episode. So yeah, lots of stuff over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. I went against all the rules of advertising. You need something quick and snappy, and here's me over explaining the shit out of this stuff. But anyway, that's it. That's all the time I got for you. That's my plugs. I'm done with it. I'm sorry, everybody. But that will do it for this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. It really means a lot to me. I hope you'll be back for the finale of our World of Warcraft series, and it'll be on Wrath of Lich King. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Mick, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again. It is truly a pleasure every time I get to do this.
Always love having you on, man. I'm excited to have you back on again for who knows, we'll figure something out. But that will do it for this episode. And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.